Hello, Blenders, and welcome to episode number 90 of Real Blend.
Wow.
A podcast that hasn't been fired from its Star Wars trilogy yet. We have some very exciting news for everybody this week, including the huge Star Wars developments that are going on. Terminator Dark Fate hits theaters this week, and two of the three of us have seen it. Jake and Kevin were able to check it out, and they're going to give us their review later on in the show. They also interviewed director Tim Miller, and we're going to have that interview in the show later on in episode 90. We will get to all of that very, very soon. But before we begin with that, I'm going to start by introducing my co-hosts, starting with Kevin McCarthy of Fox 5 in Washington, D.C. Hi, Kevin.
Sean, good afternoon. I do want to say, as a little tease to your tease, Jake and I were both extremely shocked how blunt and how open and honest Tim Miller was in our interview. So make sure you stay tuned to this entire podcast and listen to the whole interview because he gets real, like real, to a point where I disagree with him heavily on something, very, very heavily.
I haven't listened to the interview yet because I haven't seen Dark Fate and I don't want to be spoiled on anything. And I don't think you guys get into huge spoiler questions, maybe in the back half of it. But either way, I've been waiting to listen, but I love what you guys told me of what he said so far. The other name that we have yet to mention in episode 90 officially, Jake Hamilton, who is wearing a spectacular hot pink shirt.
Thanks, brother. Hot. Well, I mean, it's hot if I wear it. Am I right?
Yeah, that's very true.
Come on, Gabe. Crack a smile.
Can only go up from there. Jake Hamilton of Fox 32 in Chicago. Hi, Jake.
Hi, buddy. How are you? I've missed you.
I know, and I'm in St. Louis. Next to Gabe.
Wait, move your cameras so I can see.
Gabe, show him where I am.
Yes.
That's not creepy at all.
So
and that weird.
My mind is blown.
For people who don't know, we every time we record our podcast, even though you're only hearing audio, we all do it over Skype, so we can see each other and kind of react naturally. And Gabe is able to turn his camera and show us Sean, which is really weird because we don't ever see it from any other. We don't see it from these angles. We always see it from like face on, and just weird seeing Sean.
I can feel Gabe's indifference in person.
Wait,
Gabe's
so
doing a
that
selfie
means if
video.
we ask Gabe a question, you can bring your mic over to him.
I could. Well, he's got, honestly, hopefully I'm going to sound the best I've ever sounded before because he has a really nice microphone and then he put it on top of like
irony that a
soundproofing.
man who doesn't speak has the best microphone is not lost on me.
It's very true.
Gabe, how are you today?
Yeah, Gabe's breathing. It's going to sound better than my audio this week.
We're running late. Reviews. This is obviously, I say at the top of each show that if you guys want to send us a review, you can go over to our iTunes page and drop us a review. You can also email us at realblend@cinemablend.com. That is REELBLEND if you're new to the show after 90 episodes. This one comes from someone named Casey Proctor who says, for movie fans, by movie fans. And they write, listen up. I like watching movies and I enjoy the theater experience, but these guys love movies. And not in a self-righteous, condescending, wannabe filmmaker turned film critic sort of way.
Whoa, wait, that was a really layered sentence.
That was great.
Well, can you say that one more time?
It was a lot of...
That was a
sure.
great sentence.
They're all connected by hyphens
beautiful.
too, so it was just one long, okay. Hold on, I need a deep breath. I like watching movies and I enjoy the theater experience, but these guys love movies. And not in a self-righteous, condescending, wannabe filmmaker turned film critic sort of way.
Wow.
Okay.
I love that.
That is pretty great.
It's like really beautiful.
It kind of is. They love movies and cinematography and soundtracks and actors and directors and trailers, everything. They rarely agree 100% on anything, which is refreshing. They rant about stuff they care about, which is hilarious, and they're not afraid to gush because they are, in all caps, real fans of the greatest work to hit the big screen.
How do you spell real?
Which is equally REAL.
It was going
That's a missed opportunity.
So well. I'm joking.
Their insights, debates, and tough questions help me appreciate movies even more, and the interviews they've gotten with some of my favorite actors and directors are such a blast. Thank you, Sean, Jake, and Kevin, for sharing your fandom with us, your fans, and giving a behind-the-scenes view of junket life. Keep up the good work. Ignore the haters. Kill Bill is 2 movies. Avengers Endgame is my favorite movie of all time.
Did you write this?
Exclamation point. I think I might have. I think it's possible.
Wow.
I might have written this review. Thank you, Casey Proctor. That's my mom. I should have known that. Holy cow, that was great. Ignore the haters. Kill Bill is 2 movies. Avengers Endgame is my favorite movie of all time, and then Dunkirk with 3 exclamation points. That was amazing.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Casey Proctor. That was beautiful. Yes. So if you guys want your review read at the top of the next episode, make sure that you send it over via email, or again, like I said, hit us up on the Apple iTunes podcast. And if you want my voice to go really, really high, say nice things about me at the back half of the review.
And Casey,
our weekly.
Real quick,
Yes.
You mentioned Kill Bill is 2 movies. Just a shameless plug here. Go back in our Real Blend filmography of podcasts, I guess. Listen to the Quentin Tarantino episode where he will prove you and Sean both wrong. Thank you.
Gabe, am I allowed to ask Kevin about the Quentin Tarantino story now, or does that come up later on the show? He's debating. Later?
Yeah, do it now.
Do it now? Yes,
I
all
heard
right.
you.
Yeah,
I heard
Gabe, just
you.
do it now. So Kevin brings up Quentin Tarantino being on our podcast, and this is surreal. The boys were out in Los Angeles for an historic weekend, and I played along from home, watching them via social media and our text message chain. At one point, our text message chain got over 300 texts, unread texts in Gabe's email. When the guys travel, we often talk a lot, and keep each other up to date. But they went out there for, in a nutshell, and we'll get into some of these stories a little bit later in the show, but it was The Irishman, which we'll talk about, the Terminator 2 junket, which we will talk about, and then Jake ran out to New York to meet the Game of Thrones lady. And
She has a name.
Lady.
Game of Thrones lady. I was trying to think of one of her nicknames.
That is
Breaker
my
of
dog's
Chains?
namesake. How dare you?
No, Mother of Dragons. That's what I was trying to think of. Mother of Dragons, Breaker of Chains. The point of me of Game of Thrones, I'm supposed to get things wrong. But while they were there doing all of this amazing stuff, they are in the restaurant at the Four Seasons. Is that correct? Is that where you guys saw them?
Yep.
Yeah.
And who was there but former Real Blend guest Quentin Tarantino? And at this point, I'll turn it over to you guys to explain how it went down when you realized that you were in the same restaurant bar as Quentin Tarantino.
I want Kevin to start because Kevin started the moment, and I was just lucky enough to be able to jump in.
So, yeah, I mean, Sean references this historic weekend. I was actually just driving home from work just now before we recorded our podcast, thinking about what just occurred over the past 3 or 4 days. And we're going to get into that later in the show. But this, to give some perspective, this moment that I'm about to explain happened about 30 minutes after we had just spoken to Martin Scorsese, Al Pacino, and Robert De Niro. So just keep that in mind on a level of
As
where
one
we
does.
are. Yeah. So, okay, this is all happening in the same hotel. So Jake and I, we go upstairs to our rooms probably to like decompress a little bit, come back down, and before we're going to see, was this the Dr. Sleep night or Terminator night? I think this was Terminator night. And so I walk into the lobby bar of the hotel we're staying in, and props to Jeff Howard, who's also a member of the BFCA, who's a Real Blend listener of our show. So I walk into this lobby bar, and Jeff looks at me and goes, "Kevin, don't stare, but look over my shoulder to see who's sitting there." And I literally look up, and I don't see anybody. I don't see and so I'm like, "What are you talking about? Are you doing some kind of joke?" He goes, and he turns around and he goes, "Oh my God, he was just sitting there. Sorry." I'm like, "Oh, no, there he is." And he points back. I look over my left shoulder in the bathroom area, and it's Quentin Tarantino. First of all, yes, I've met him multiple times. It doesn't take away from the fact that when I see him physically in person every single time, my jaw just drops. It's still surreal to me. I don't care what anyone says. Everyone, Kevin, you've interviewed him before. You have pictures with him. You've met him before. I don't care. It's still Quentin Tarantino. Yeah. I don't care. So I walk over with my wife, Lauren, and I said hi to him. I said, "Hey, great to see you again. You were on our podcast." And he goes, "Oh, that's right. You're with the 3 guys. You guys were awesome. I had such a great time." And he was like, he remembered the show immediately. I didn't bring up that we had 2 other hosts. He brought up that we had 3 guys on the show.
That's incredible.
3 other guys. So he was referring to Gabe as well. So he's including all 4 of us. And so that's
unfortunate.
Well, then he starts. So anyway, so I show him the tattoo, and I can tell he's like, people are starting to bother him. I don't want to be that guy. And then Lauren pulls out her phone, and she has a photo of her recreation of Sharon Tate, where she went to the movie theater where Margot Robbie shot her scene. And so Quentin like takes her phone, he's like zooming in on it. I didn't mean to call him Quentin, Mr. Tarantino. He's like zooming in on the phone. And I said, listen, I know you're slammed. I don't want to bug you. Do you mind if I take a photo with you just because I have my tattoo? And he goes, oh, no problem at all. He goes, I'm not busy. It's fine. I was like, I know, but this is your personal time, whatever. And then we took the photo, and then I shake his hand. I congratulate him and his wife because who she just recently announced she's pregnant. He's very, very happy about that, very thankful. And then I walk away. And I'm like, that's it. I'm done. I'm good. Scorsese earlier, now Quentin Tarantino. It's a little too much. So, by the way, before I went over to Tarantino, when Jeff was telling me where he was, I looked over at the table. Tarantino just left like a notebook and notepad just sitting there on the table where he was sitting. I'm like, what if someone walks up and just takes that? What's in there? What if it's a script?
Well, all it was a sheet of paper that said "Kill Bill, 1 or 2 movies?" Question mark, and he just circled it a bunch of times.
He's still debating.
He was like, I don't know.
Right.
I gotta ask a question.
Yeah.
If you're Quentin Tarantino and you walk into the Four Seasons bar and you realize it's during a BFCA event or the weekend of a BFCA event, yeah, right.
You turn around and
your
leave.
First reaction just, oh shit.
In all seriousness, like if you've never been to Hollywood or you've never, your perception of going to Hollywood means like seeing an actor or seeing a celebrity in real life, and I'm not the first person to say this, but you guys know it's true. Pick a Friday or Saturday night, go post up at the Four Seasons bar, and just order yourself a $40 drink and just sit there and sip on it. Because there's a good chance you're going to see somebody.
And even better, if you plan it over an awards weekend.
Oh, yeah.
When we were just there for Joker, there was, what was going on that weekend? Why was all the TV people were there?
Something was going on. It was the Emmys.
Dave says it was the Emmys. It was the Emmys. And we ran into a ridiculous number of TV people. I was checking out in the lobby, and Jonathan Banks from Breaking Bad was just there hanging out with his family. I was like, what? And then Gabe came off the elevator and did a little, like a head shake kind of recognition thing with Jon Snow from
Kit Harington.
It's weird though, because you have to be careful because we so often, we'll get into debates about movies, and you have to be careful in this hotel really ragging on a movie. Because there's a good chance that but right behind you is the producer or the writer or the director of the star of the movie you're ragging on.
Yeah, it was at that same hotel that the guy who played the King of the North, Sean Snow, spoiled the. All right,
anyway, I'm gonna pick up the next part.
Yeah. So finish it.
So then
finish it.
Kevin comes over and starts to tell me the story, and I'm like, dude, we have to go back. I want to see him too, man. So Kevin was very gracious because also we didn't want to ruin the moment that Kevin had. So he said, okay, well, let's walk together, and I'll keep walking, and then you just stay right there. So I kind of was waiting because Jeff Howard, who Kevin mentioned, was still talking to Quentin Tarantino, and I was sort of just awkwardly standing there, and I was like, I don't know what to do now. I don't know what to do with my hands. Right when Kevin walks back, Jeff Howard looks at us and goes, I gotta say, I love the podcast that you did with those guys. And Tarantino, he looked over at Kevin and goes, oh yeah, and then sees me and goes, oh hey, yeah, oh, and he goes, it was too short. He goes, I could have kept going talking to you guys. We need to do 90 minutes, Kevin. Didn't he say that? We got to do 90 minutes together.
But he started geeking out about cinematography. He was so awesome, and he didn't need to be. But it was a really cool moment. If you go to any of our social medias, you can find a photo or some comments about it. But it was he was very aware of our podcast. He was very aware of being on our show, and he wanted to do it again. And it was a really cool thing because think about how many people he talked to, how long ago that was. That was July. And this was happening at the end of October.
And we would love to have him on really if Gabe approves it.
Yes.
Well, you guys don't understand. When you said 90 minutes, the first thing he started to do was give the rap sign immediately. Yeah. And I had to be like, Gabe, it's Quentin. He wants to come on and let him talk.
He said if Gabe is okay with it.
If Gabe's okay with it?
That was his exact words. So, but I said, listen, man, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't get through to him right now. Yeah.
All right, we'll talk to him. All right. The weekly poll. So we put a poll up on Twitter every Friday. You guys participate in it. We bring it to the podcast as a conversation. This one from last week was from a film industry perspective. What is the more important film? And we gave you these choices, The Terminator or T2 Judgment Day. Kevin, which one do you think won?
Oh, T2. There's no way T1 won that poll.
All right. Can you want to guess what percentage? You're right, T2 won. Do you know what percentage it got, roughly?
I mean, here's the thing. The thing about the internet sometimes is people want to just pick things just to be detracting from the popular vote. I mean, it should be 100%, but I'm going to go, but knowing the internet, 75 to 25?
It was 81 to 19.
Okay.
81 to 19.
But I agree it's T2, but I could see the argument for T1.
Well, I'll make the argument for T1 because you don't have T2 without
exactly.
T1.
Like that's a pretty damn good argument.
That's like saying you don't have Vertigo without Citizen Kane. I mean, come on. I am not.
That is not the same thing at all.
No, it is the same thing. My point is, like, your T1, T2 is. I understand the direct correlation between a sequel. My point is, you could make an argument that every film that's coming out would not have ever happened if it wasn't for a certain director's breakthrough in technology prior to that. So I don't.
Well, but let me say this:
I don't buy into that.
Would you even get to T2 if they went with O.J. Simpson as the Terminator?
Well, they weren't gonna go with O.J. Simpson. That was like apparently I watched Arnold Schwarzenegger on Jimmy Kimmel last night. And right. Arnold said that Arnold claims that it was to a point where he was being considered. I don't know if you saw Arnold's. Well, I'll let you watch it because I don't want to make the joke because I think it's a little bit insensitive. But I do think that at the end of the day, James Cameron has said officially, and Kimmel read it on the air, that OJ was in talks, but there was never any traction given to him becoming the role. It was
and didn't
never
Arnold
to that
go out
point.
for the Michael Biehn role? Didn't Arnold go out for the Michael Biehn role originally?
Oh, I don't know. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Though.
I think he read for that instead. All right, well, I would have argued Terminator, but I mean, clearly, it's hard to go against Terminator 2 Judgment Day. And all of this leads into the release of Terminator Dark Fate, this is the 6th film in the franchise, is that correct? But they're saying essentially that it's coming right after T2. It's going after the trend of certain franchises where they say, ignore all those other sequels, and we're continuing the timeline from where T2 was. So to this end, Linda Hamilton is back. Arnold Schwarzenegger is back. You guys have seen all the trailers, but we were lucky enough to sit down with director Tim Miller. Kevin and Jake got a chance to go deep into the making of Terminator Dark Fate, his approach to the franchise, and get into a little bit of spoiler talk, but nothing that's going to ruin the film for you guys. So, Gabe says no, he's cutting out all that spoiler talk, and he's going to keep that for a little bit later. So this is safe to listen to if you have not seen Terminator Dark Fate yet. So without further ado, this is Tim Miller, the director of both Deadpool and Terminator Dark Fate on the ArnoldBlend podcast.
All right, we're going to kick it off. ArnoldBlend welcomes this week the great Tim Miller. Tim, thank you so much for being here this week, man. This is fantastic.
It is my pleasure and my honor.
This is something I never thought I'd ever say, but this is a Terminator movie that wouldn't exist in our lifetime unless Linda Hamilton said, yes, I'm going to do it. I will come back. Was there a version of this movie in your mind if she said no? And how do you put that kind of pressure on someone to say, this movie doesn't exist without you?
Well, I was there before before even Jim was back. David Nelson and I started talking about doing this movie. He saw a pre-finished version of Deadpool because we were talking about another project, and then bonded over a nerd love of this one. And he said, I'd like to get another shot at it. And would you be interested in help formulating what that was? And I said, well, one of the key things that would make me want to do it is if Jim came back, because that, as a fan, would say, okay, you guys aren't, can I cuss?
Yes, absolutely.
That as a fan would be some indicator that you weren't going to fuck it up again, right? And so, but there was no story there. And then when Jim came back, immediately the conversation turned to Linda, because to me it was always about Linda Hamilton and continuing that story. If Linda didn't come back, honestly, I don't know. I might have bailed at that point. But for her, I think it was just a question of whether there was something interesting that she could bring. And I think the fact that you guys have seen the movie, so I think the fact that much time has passed allowed her story to be what it was, which I think is really interesting, and allowed T-800's story to be what it was. It's required a certain passage of time to make both of those characters interesting again, I think.
T2 changed my life. I was 8 years old. I remember seeing it on the couch in between my mom and dad. The visual effects in that film, I look better than a lot of movies still coming out today, which is unbelievable. And I'm curious, because you had so many visual effects to use, because technology has changed a lot since T2, where was that push-pull there of how much you wanted to get in camera versus digitally? Because I feel like you had a perfect balance, just like James did on the second one.
Well, first of all, thank you. You're very kind. I don't know about perfect balance. It really comes down to I think practical effects are always great if you can do it. If it does work, it's better and cheaper to get it in camera. It's great for the actors because they can interact with something, and not people acting on a green screen is tricky. So that's good. I think it's particularly important to have those practical, like the truck flip, for instance.
Yes.
It became a thing where do we have to flip a real fucking truck, Tim? Yes, we have to flip a real fucking yes, we have to flip a real fucking truck. And there were times in post where I said, did we have to flip a real fucking truck? But I'm glad we did, because I felt like that grounded sort of the sequence in a way that it would be different if it didn't. Where it's an option like that, where it's not an option like the C5 plane sequence, where obviously we can't crash two planes together, then you have to rely on visual effects. But I'm comfortable with that, and so
It's your background.
yeah, and we previs the fuck out of it, so you can kind of go through with the production team and go, okay, we can do this practically, let's do it. Okay, we can't do this practically, let's do it. Can we put Linda and Arnold on a wire? No, we can't throw them around.
Not with that attitude.
Yeah, no, we can't. So you kind of go, okay, well then what are we going to do? Is it going to be, you kind of run through your list of options. Is it going to be a stunt double with a face replacement, or is it going to be an all CG shot? And you just kind of work your way through in a very logical way. But my approach to visual effects is let the cheapest, most effective way win. If I can do it practically and that's cheapest, great. If the cheapest way is to do it with CG, great. I'm not afraid of them blending together or feeling like they coexist, which is not to say that I think we nailed it in every single shot, because I don't. But I thought we did a pretty good job.
Damn good.
Thank you.
You do something really interesting with this movie is you walk this really fine line of fan service where there are some really great throwbacks that I really enjoyed, and there were moments where I was like, is he going to do that? Is he going to do the throwback? And you didn't, which I love. You avoided some of what I thought were going to be very obvious throwbacks. What is the balance of kind of tipping the cap and sort of like giving fans that acknowledgement of the past films, but then also going, no, this has to be its own film on its own? Because there are a lot of moments I thought you were going to do this very obvious throwback, and you didn't, and I applaud you for that.
Well, I think being a fan is the key to that whole experience. So I feel like, because I love it, and I can sit there and imagine I'm somebody on the internet or in a movie theater watching this movie and decide, okay, what's fan service and what is honoring the franchise. And some of the stuff I feel like, that I would, I'm done with Hasta La Vista, baby. Honestly, I was kind of done with I'll Be Back.
That's what I wanted to add, like in regards to his question, was that something you kind of almost didn't use?
I'll be honest that I had to be forced to use
Really?
I'll Be Back. And then I said, well, if we're going to do it, then we're going to do it differently, and we're going to give it to Linda, and we're going to throw it away. Like, it's not going to be... Yeah.
Is that what that action is? It's like literally throwing it away?
It is.
I'll be back.
Yeah, I'll be back. Yeah. And Linda tells the story again. She's like, because she won't watch the movie yet. She doesn't like to look at monitors. She hasn't watched the movie yet. She's going to be my second date to the premiere, because she's going to watch it for the first time at the premiere, which scares the fuck out of me. Because Linda Hamilton's disappointment is what nightmares are made of. But
Tim hasn't slept in like 5 days.
it's true, but in a good way. She's the loveliest possible woman that you just don't want to disappoint her, right? But she did say thank you for that a couple of weeks ago, because her kids had seen it and said, "Oh, Mom, it's great." In a commercial, And one of the commercials, she's like, "Oh, Mom, it's great. It's perfect." So she's like, "Thank you for that." But the way she throws it away, because I said, just throw it away. It's not a moment. We don't want to make it a moment. And then Arnold's the same way, where I thought maybe we were gilding the lily a bit when he says, I won't be back. But I don't know. It just felt kind of natural to be in the script there. That one was less conscious. The one that was very conscious was the Terminator putting on the glasses in the mirror, which is a big trope that Jim wanted, and that was the way the scene was written, and I just couldn't do it. I shot it, but I couldn't believe that it actually survived without him putting on the glasses, because every time in the screenings, you feel the audience going, yes, 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 yes. No. You feel their disappointment. And the pleaser, as my wife calls me, in me wants to go, I want to give the fans what they want, but I felt like so strongly that was the wrong move, because we're about to spend this whole time to say, I'm not that guy anymore. I'm a different guy. I've changed, and you can't start that journey of redemption by having him be the same guy he was. So I thought that was a very conscious decision, that to say, I'm not that man anymore. I'm something new. But I cannot believe that there wasn't more studio pressure to fix it, because you could feel it in the theater.
Well, thank you for your honesty about the "I'll be back" line, because I was nervous about it when I initially thought, I was like, is she going to say this? And it was in the trailer, but then when you watch it with the context of the movie, the throwaway aspect of it was actually the perfect way to go, because again, it's one of those things where you go, you don't want to like make people cringe if she says the line, but it was actually perfect the way you executed. So thank you for being honest about that. I was actually
sure.
That's something I was wondering if you would speak about. That's pretty cool. One of the things that I find interesting are happy accidents in films. And one of the craziest, coolest stories I've ever heard was that sequence in Deadpool when he drives up with the cab, forgets the guns in the back. And that was written, from what I understand, because the guys couldn't afford essentially a gigantic shootout.
Yes.
From what I understand is that's the story. What was a similar, any type of happy accident on this movie where maybe a visual effect was done because to save time or something along those lines, like Deadpool? I know it's a different budget, obviously. But.
Jeez. I don't know. I can't think of any happy accidents, partly because this film had, triple the budget. Deadpool was, and that requires a lot more planning. You're in prep for a lot longer. So I don't know. I can't say that there were any happy accidents. It was kind of very methodical in the plan. And you've heard that old, there's the movie you write, there's the movie you shoot, there's the movie that you make and edit, which is certainly true. But it was more about condensing stuff in editorial, because we just shot too much fucking movie, than it was about having to do anything because we didn't have money. Time we were short of, but.
Cool.
So you're clearly a movie fan, and you're also someone who seems to have his finger on the pulse of what fans think and how they feel about certain things. And I'd imagine that there are a lot of Terminator fans that don't like the past few movies that have.
What?
I know, it's surprising.
This comes as a surprise.
I know.
To me. Yes.
Whenever you come into a movie like this and you know how people feel about the past few ones, do you have to look at the past few movies and ask yourself, what did they do wrong? Why don't people like those movies?
We looked at all those movies, but it wasn't with that in mind, because I knew the answer to that question.
What is the answer?
It didn't have Linda Hamilton in it. It is essentially Sarah's story, and even if they focused on Sarah, it's not Linda Hamilton, and that it's always going to feel odd, and that's nobody's fault. I'm not taking away from anything in those movies. The other reason we really look at those movies is because even though they're not officially part of this timeline, you also don't want to do anything that they did that looks like you're copying it, even though I still did in a couple of places there, because there were so many movies and so many good ideas in there. You're inevitably going to solve them in the same way. And it was the same thing with Jim's approach to this movie. Sometimes it was, you can see that he put a lot of thought into the franchise, these characters, and the situation. And in many ways, he had already solved these problems the best way they could be solved. And so to do it a different way, like Legion's origin being, very similar to Skynet's, well, in Jim's mind, that's the way a rogue artificial intelligence arises.
We're gonna hit you with
Full
some
stop.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, that's it.
We're gonna hit you with some rapid fire stuff because we don't have a ton of time with you.
Okay.
We're gonna get into spoilers shortly. If this is on the spoiler line, let me know. We can be very vague about it. Talk about de-aging Furlong and Hamilton. Can you talk about the effects on that? Because that looked phenomenal. Did they shoot those scenes? Did Furlong shoot that?
We all of the characters, Linda, Arnold, and Eddie, all did facial capture. So the CG model of the young version of them is driven by them performing the various expressions and dialogue. There was originally dialogue in that scene. We decided to not have it. So they came in and did a day of facial capture. In Eddie's case, it was just for this. And Linda and Arnold's, it was for this and so much more. And then it's a body double. So it's a person with a little cap on that allows us to track their head. And then the wizards at ILM replaced their heads. And it's not just there. It's all, there's the younger version. But throughout the scene, we use either all CG doubles or digi-double or head replacements where we're using stunt actors and we're replacing their heads.
These days when studios are making, these big franchise movies, you're not just making the movie that you're making now, you're also a lot of times setting the groundwork for what's coming. I'm curious, how much of the future do you know that of the storyline, and does that storyline potentially involve Robert Patrick coming back as an older T-1000?
I wouldn't answer that question even if I knew it. But I can tell you that, look, Jim said it before, we broke 3 films worth of story, and I know where it's going, but we stopped talking about those movies when we started making this movie. So whether another filmmaker will pick it up and take it in a different direction than we had originally planned, they certainly can, and they probably will. I doubt it'll be the same exact story that we came up with.
The implication being that it wouldn't be you, like you wouldn't come back to do the next one?
I was grateful just to play in this sandbox once. It's Jim's sandbox, and he can take his toys and do whatever he wants with it. I'm just grateful that I got to do this one. And there's a lot of stories to tell, and I'm old, so I have to look at, how many more movies I can make. The other part. What was the other part of the question? The T-1000. I couldn't tell you about that.
Would you like to, as a fan, would you like to see, like, if it's not you moving forward, do you hope the next guy brings him back?
I can't answer that question. I don't want to set those expectations on him. I feel like we did the fan service with this Terminator being a combination of those two things. I don't know. I don't think it would work the same way for him. It couldn't work the same way. Because you kind of set the T-800 up as it ages like a real human. Robert Patrick wouldn't age like a real human. He'd be forever young, which means a digital Robert Patrick the whole time, which is something that I wouldn't suggest a filmmaker do. But,
Right. Well, one more question apiece, and then we'll let you go.
Okay,
sure. Yeah. Speaking of wanting to be,
you should go until they come in and drag.
Hey, if you're cool with that,
we could
just keep doing it until she drags the mic out.
Cool. If you're enjoying this, then we're all for
sure.
it.
That's what I'm here for.
If you, just as a fan, I know that you're a fan of the original Terminator and Terminator 2. Hypothetically, just having fun watching those movies, what is one sequence that you wish that you could have a crack at directing, where you look at that and go, that looks fucking cool?
In Terminator 2?
Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite moment in those whole movies is when they're in the pickup truck and Arnold climbs from the back and up onto the front and machine guns the guy. And that's kind of what I was thinking of, where the scene we have where he machine guns the guy in the face.
Yeah.
That was kind of the same idea. And then Jim said, which we could never do these days, but Jim said that stunt guy did it without a wire.
Come on.
Totally. He just did it. Which we would never be allowed to do today.
How did he get by with that then? That wasn't that.
I don't
long
know.
ago.
It's fucking dangerous shit, man. You'd slip off and you'd be under the treads of the truck.
Oh my god,
fucking crazy. Yeah.
I love in the opening recalling Linda's television or video moment from the first from T2.
One of the best ideas I ever had.
It's a cool idea because it also plays on T1 redoing that scene too. Obviously, except for it's someone else in the first one, the original. But I find that interesting and you actually put that on screen in this gigantic IMAX theater and you still have to match it tonally to what you're doing. What is the idea of like when we open with that and then we cut to your cinematography, your own movie? Is there a matching you do there?
Here you go. I should have thought of this. That is the idea. That's the happy accident thing you were looking for earlier, because what we had done originally, we had all these logos up front. We had like 1.5 minutes of logos, and I'm like, oh my fucking god, we got a fucking 1.5 minutes of fucking logos. We got to make this relevant. And so I said, maybe we should play back snippets of the movie. Maybe we should, to the editor, and Julian's like, oh, that's a good idea, Julian Clark. And then we found that piece.
Yes.
We remembered that piece, and it fit like it was meant to be, like a glove. And
Didn't
then
we
Jim,
look at each
and
other
then-
when it came up?
And Jim had the idea of, maybe you should insert some little flashbacks of the actual footage, which at first I was like, I don't know about that. And then we started fooling with how to do it. And
That's
and it
35
looked
mil
great.
and you're digital. So that must have been an interesting blending there,
Yeah,
right?
but we're stepping on it so much that you kind of get away with any kind of fuckery that you want to, and we purposely make it look like, because that was from a
TV screen.
Yeah, 3/4 inch deck.
Wow.
Shitty. They filmed the actual TV screen, and we got the 35 of them filming the TV screen.
What?
But,
Come
but,
on!
But we didn't get the original. We didn't get them the original footage of them before they put it on the VHS. If that makes sense.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, Tim Miller, this has been nothing. We got a couple more minutes? Oh, my God. Okay. So, one of the things that I remember about T2 was going into it and being genuinely surprised that Arnold was the good guy this time. I mean, I remember the studio sort of
Brilliant.
really kept that under wraps. It was a massive deal.
Right.
And then I remember thinking that the T1000 was going to be the next savior. These days, with the internet and people kind of picking apart every single frame from the trailer, it's harder to surprise. Is it possible? Is it ever going to be possible to do anything like that ever again?
I don't think so.
No. Does
Yeah.
that bum you out as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I think you can hide some turns, but you can't hide the fact that Arnold is in the movie. I was developing this other movie at Sony, and I was protecting this big turn in the middle with these creatures that go crazy and they're docile before. Anyway, I'm going, no, we got to protect that, blah, blah, blah. And the executive goes, well, it's going to be in the trailer, Tim. These things are like ripping people apart. And I'm like, fuck, you're right. Okay, well, never mind. It's hard to fight the math that people like it better when they have some intimation of the story. Film nerds, and me included, like the surprise of it all, but studies show that.
Those damn studies.
I know, but it's hard to. You can't say fuck the fans. You can't say fuck the theater goers. I love test screenings because they tell you so much about that. And even if you don't want to hear it, sometimes you fucking got to listen to it.
Some of my, so I grew up watching T2. My favorite cut of the movie is a special edition because you get the smile scene and you get a lot of great elements. It's some of the best trivia ever in movie history comes out of that film. But I love the idea that the security officer, when T1000 comes up, is actually the twin brother of that security officer. But even Linda Hamilton's twin sister at the end of the film. Did Linda Hamilton's twin sister get to come play on this one?
She did not.
Was there a thought about possibly doing that?
No, I don't think they look that much alike anymore. So no, Linda never brought it up.
Oh, that's interesting. They don't look because they look almost identical in the Terminator films. So we are obviously, as you can tell,
Linda wanted to control every aspect of her performance. So to give it up to anybody, you're like literally the stunt double. Is it physically possible for me to do it? Okay, well then I'm going to do it.
Wow, good for her.
Yeah, she loves it.
We are, as you can tell, pretty geeked out to be here, and we're pretty big fans. And tomorrow we're sitting down with Arnold and Linda, and which we're insanely geeked out about. And the hardest thing I think for both of us, I'm speaking for you too, Kevin, is like kind of getting over our geekdom and our fandom in order to sort of be professionals and go, okay, we gotta do this interview, we gotta do this.
Then ask them some questions that are not the normal questions. Like,
We're trying
so
to.
what was it like to do?
We never lead with what was it like.
Because you'll have to. You got to knock them out of their comfort zone.
Well, we have what we call geek out dinners where we sit down and we practice our questions on each other and we kind of help each other kind of form questions and stuff.
Before you walked in here,
that's what we were doing. Yeah. As a filmmaker, I know that you're obviously, I can tell by the product of this movie that you're a fan as well. Do you have that moment where you have to sort of get over and go, okay, I got to get past the fandom and I've got to be their director. I have got to be able to tell them what to do. How hard is it to not be a fan anymore?
you know, by the time you get to that moment where you have to direct them, you've gotten to know them quite a lot because they've been there for a few weeks before the camera rolls. Or I've met Arnold, you know, early on. You can kind of get a sense of what kind of person they are. So at that time, I'm so involved in just like doing my fucking job the best I possibly can, that the fanboy, it really doesn't have, there's no room left for him in the process. Every once in a while you have a little moment where you go, holy fuck, it's Linda Hamilton.
Go full Chris Farley.
Yeah.
Remember that time?
Holy fuck, yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah. But usually I'm just involved in the, 800 questions that are being asked, or, what do we got to do? What's the next setup, or that sort of a thing. And they're both so normal, regular people that,
You're still directing Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton. It's crazy to me. It's amazing.
He does.
Yeah.
And Arnold will fuck with you. It's definitely true. Like the no smoking on set. Arnold's like, fuck you. Fuck you. Yeah.
Going off of it, this is going to be the final question. My favorite scene in T2, besides the smile scene which James Cameron cut out of the movie, was the thumbs up. And, to me, it's the first time I ever cried in a film. It was like, it hits me harder than I could ever imagine, just the way he does it. Jake and I were sitting in the theater last night watching your film, and there was a moment where that could have potentially happened. And Jake and I were like, I'm glad he didn't go thumbs up there, because I feel like that would have been too on the nose. Was there a version of that scene where he went like that?
Never. And it would never happen in a
Thank
Tim
you.
Miller movie. Yes. But I can only say that was not my favorite part of the movie. And the fact that it is yours is a symptom of your age. I think that you saw it, because when I saw T2, I was 27, right? But one of the first things I asked Linda is, how do you feel about the thumbs up or moment? And she's like, no. And I went, okay, we're going to be fine. Because
But I love that scene.
I know.
And we were that age when it came out?
It is. And well, Jim loves that scene. Many people love that scene. For me, it's iconic, I know, but maybe a little too sentimental for.
Tim, I love that
I know,
scene.
and I don't want you to not love it.
You ruined my childhood, Tim.
I want you to love it the way you can only love those moments in your life when you feel that the world is a good place, and
Do we know
only
if it was
good
Arnold's
things will
thumb
happen.
for real? I want to ask them that tomorrow. Do you know if it's actually Arnold's thumb?
I do not know that question.
That's my opening question tomorrow.
You should. Yeah, you should. Is that really your thumb?
I want to know if it's his
I can
thumb.
tell you that almost every actor except Linda Hamilton and Arnold, actually, for that matter, comes to set and immediately looks around like, who in the crew has hands that look like mine? Because then they don't have to be in that shot, like it's opening a doorknob or whatever.
probably
They
Jim Cameron's
They can go
hand.
back to their trap.
Because it was his hands drawing the Kate Winslet photo in Titanic, right? Those are Jim Cameron's hands.
It's Jim Cameron's thumb.
I would bet you that it's not, but I would also bet you that Arnold will never admit that it's not. But who knows? Let's say that it is. Wouldn't you feel better if it was?
I've been going over all my questions, and that's the one I was like, I've always wanted to know that. But all right, well, thank you, Tim. This has been an honor. Thank you for someone who's 8 years old and saw Terminator 2 for the first time to sit in the theater last night and actually get an experience that was like the way I felt when I was 8 years old. It was just a pleasure. So,
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
So, as Sean mentioned, there were some spoiler things that we did discuss, and we are going to put those out after the release through articles and YouTube, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But, the interview, it's interesting because Jake and I sat down for the interview, and we were told 20 minutes or so, and you heard in the audio, Tim Miller said, no, just keep going until they come in and get you. So it's funny because, like, we have meetings before we do these interviews, and we called Gabe, and we were like, Gabe, we want to do some spoiler talk because this movie is very spoiler heavy, and what should we do? So we purposely saved the spoiler questions for the last two questions of the interview, but then that's when Tim went, oh, let's keep going. So Gabe's editing process on that thing's going to be a bit insane, but the spoiler talk is actually very fascinating. So please check CinemaBlend.com, check their YouTube channel come Monday the 4th. Around that time period, that week, and we'll have those up. But it was cool. It was really cool to talk to him. He was so nice. And obviously, Deadpool 1 was an incredible film, which probably landed him this job, right? I would assume, right?
Oh, I think so. And thank you very much to Paramount for hooking us up with that. That's a fantastic opportunity that they gave us in promotion of Dark Fate. Okay, talking points. And I can't wait to get Jake's opinion on the news that broke most recently that the Game of Thrones writers, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, who for the longest time have been allegedly working on a Star Wars trilogy that, like so many Star Wars projects that come and go through various phases, has now been canceled. And for various reasons, whoever side you want to believe, Jake, your reaction to hearing that the two Davids, Benioff and Weiss, who we primarily know from Game of Thrones, are now not going to be playing in the Star Wars sandbox.
Well, my first thought was, because, there was a rumor, what I think a probably pretty substantiated rumor, that the reason that they rushed through the end of Game of Thrones as quickly as they did was that they wanted to get to Star Wars as quickly as possible.
Right?
Had you heard that?
Yes, and I believed it.
I believe it too. And so the fact that we got shortchanged on the back end of one of the greatest shows of all time for nothing,
right?
For no reason whatsoever, it kind of stings a little bit, if I'm being honest.
Sure.
I feel like
I didn't even think about that aspect.
Yeah, that hurts me. I feel like both HBO and Disney, they do something that kind of bothers me, which is they just announce things and then flippantly go, nah, we changed our mind. I mean, HBO has announced like season 2. Like usually HBO's big thing is after the first episode of a series airs, they immediately go, we've greenlit season 2. It did so well, we're going to season 2, baby. And then season 1 doesn't do so well, and they go, it's canceled.
Right.
So, and then this is obviously not the first time that Disney has changed their Star Wars plans, where they've backtracked something or canceled something.
Let's go over a few of those. Obviously, Lord and Miller getting removed from Solo, I think being the biggest one.
Colin
that was mid-production.
I think I don't think we're ever gonna see a Ryan Johnson Star Wars movie ever again.
Oh, you think that's done too?
I think that's done. And so just like it makes me realize that like you can't really I feel like 85% of these announcements are either testing the water or promotion. But Josh Trank, or they're just using it as promotion.
Well,
so I don't really trust these until. I would say until they start filming, but Lord and Miller have shown that that's not the case. Until the movie is in front of my eyeballs, I don't. Not even then. I took to quote the great Kevin McCarthy, "If it happens."
Happens.
See, I'm telling you.
I want to say that Ewan McGregor said today or yesterday in interviews for Dr. Sleep that the Obi-Wan Kenobi show that is now going to Disney Plus was going to be a film for a long time. He was under the impression that it was going to be a film. We also Gareth Edwards apparently didn't preside over the reshoots for Rogue One. I think they brought in the guy who did Tony Clayton. I forget that guy. Tony, Michael Clayton, Tony Gilroy. That's right. Almost every major project aside from The Force Awakens and Last Jedi have been tinkered with in some way, shape, or form, including all these ones that they announced. It's almost like DC syndrome also, too. Like DC always announces projects, then they sort of go away. And then to this end, this news sort of just broke, so we really don't know the ins and outs of it. The Game of Thrones prequel, supposed to be a show on HBO that actually had Naomi Watts as the star of it, and nobody really knew what it was going to be. We were very curious to find out when it was going to be set and who it would involve. News breaks right as we're about to record that the HBO is not going forward with that show anymore. So yeah, Jake, that speaks to your problem that you have with HBO and the way that they announce things. My question is that like now, and you say the Ryan Johnson thing isn't going to happen, and I honestly believe that there's probably some truth to that because you don't hear any sort of news on it or developments toward it. And then we did hear the announcement that Kevin Feige was shepherding a movie, but we don't know any real details about that, just that Kathy Kennedy announces that he's going to do it. There's no tangible, concrete Star Wars movie in the near future for us to even get excited about. And so I asked the question on social media of like, what does the future of Star Wars even look like? And one of our friends, Drew Taylor, got in touch with me, and he's like, "Yeah, you're right. They're never going to make any more Star Wars movies ever again. It's all done." I was like, "All right, I understand that. They're probably going to continue to make it, but isn't it a little bit strange that with this major film franchise that they have nothing on the books that we know of at the very least? Does that not concern you guys in the least bit?"
Well, for me, I'm all right. I'm speaking as somebody who's a fan of Star Wars, but I'm not as big of a fan of Star Wars as Jake.
Sure,
but Jake mentioned something today in our text thread, which, when a Star Wars fan says something like Jake said, which is the idea that Episode 9 is now less exciting compared to The Mandalorian. I find that to be a great example of fatigue, and when Episode 7 hit, when Force Awakens came out, it was genuinely one of the most exciting times I've ever seen about going to the movies. That and even something like Endgame this year. And you don't feel that now. I mean, Episode 8, regardless of what you think about it, it didn't leave a lot open to be excited about into Episode 9. So I guess my point is, there's like so many of these films, and my anchors on the air sometimes say, where does this one exist? Like today I was airing the Mandalorian trailer, and I had to kind of break down this is not in the Skywalker saga. It does take place 5 years after Return of the Jedi, but it's not the same storyline. There's no, it's gotten to a point where I don't think average moviegoers are understanding where all this stuff is fitting in. It's confusing. And the idea that Skywalker's coming out in December and ending a Skywalker saga over 9 films, yet the leading 3 characters from the original trilogy are nowhere to be found in this film in the sense of a leading sense. I mean, clearly we think that Luke's going to come back. Carrie Fisher's performances from 7 will be there. I don't know what's going to happen if they'll bring Han Solo back some crazy way. I have no idea. But my point being is that it is gotten to a point. So when I read a story like this Game of Thrones creators being taken off of the film, I'm like, I think it's the right move. I mean, I don't know that we need 3 more Star Wars films, 2022, 2024, and 2026. I don't love what they did with the end of Game of Thrones. I think that maybe Kathleen Kennedy took a step back. I don't know. I don't want to speak for her, but when you look at something like Season 8, which did not have the George R.R. Martin writing behind it. And then you see what those guys delivered in Season 8. Whether you like it or not, it was definitely not a great season in regards to critical sense of how overall reception from fans. So, and then they say things like this, which really bothers me. In some press conference or some Q&A they did recently, I think it was yesterday, one of them said something to the point of, we don't care about fan reaction. Did you see that quote? It was something about fan reaction doesn't matter to us. I'll find the exact quote, but it was very dismissive of how fans, to me, that's the way. Hold on. Let me say something. I think that's the way. I think that's the way a 5th grader responds to someone being critical of their work. To me, it's like they can't accept that Season 8 didn't live up to expectations. And I think by saying, I don't care what fans say, it is a very immature and dismissive way. My point being, though, is that giving these guys a Star Wars trilogy, while they also signed this massive Netflix deal at the same time, just seems weird to me. I don't understand. I know they were given Star Wars prior to Netflix, but why would you take the Netflix deal if you were working on Star Wars? And then some people argue the ending of Season 8 was affected because they were already working on Star Wars. And it's like, these guys don't know. I mean, again, this is all speculation and alleged, but I do find it fascinating that they couldn't focus on one thing or the other. And that to me is a problem.
I will, just to defend what they said about not listening to fan reactions. Kevin, you work in local news, man. Mm-hmm. You and Sean, you understand the dangers of a comment section. If we all changed what we do based on random viewers who get it up within themselves to watch the news and then find our Facebook page and leave a comment telling us what's wrong with our hair or what's wrong with our makeup or what's wrong with the shirt we're wearing.
There's nothing wrong with your hair, sir.
I think that's completely different because they were praised for 6 or 7 seasons, and that season, I mean, listen, I understand it's an opinion, but that season was nowhere near the quality. And I think you as a Game of Thrones fan could agree.
No, and we were saying earlier, we were shortchanged because of Star Wars. So to then not get Star Wars, I mean, if we were shortchanged because of Star Wars and then they turned in an amazing Star Wars trilogy, I think it would have made the pill that was Season 8 go down a little easier.
I want to bring up a bigger problem, which is if these guys pitched a story that was big enough for a trilogy, right? And Kathleen Kennedy and the team at Star Wars believed in whatever the concept was to be strong enough to carry 3 films, then it should be pretty easy for them to keep those 3 films on the calendar and find a filmmaker who can step in and do that story.
Exactly.
We don't know that they're not.
Or did Benioff and Weiss come to Star Wars and say, we want to make a trilogy? And Star Wars was like, go ahead. Like, did they not have an idea? Is there not a story?
This goes back to the idea of the discussion I think we had a couple weeks ago, and I think Jay can speak to this more. And I don't know the exact details surrounding this, but you go into episode 7, 8, and 9. From what I understand, they did not have a concrete idea of what the full scope of that story was. Am I right or wrong
100%.
on that? Okay, so...
No, I think you're right.
Playing to your point, Sean, then, yeah, they probably just kind of pitched 3 movies, and they were like,
Yeah.
whatever.
Well,
I mean,
and
you know what I
again,
mean?
I'm going to take the Marvel side because I love Marvel. But when Kevin Feige maps out Phase 4, right, he knows what he wants the Doctor Strange story to be. Or the Black Panther 2 story to be, and he'll work with Coogler and Derrickson, but it's not like he just says to those guys, make Black Panther 2, doesn't care what it's going to be.
In fact,
just
haven't we often heard like the Russo brothers say like, oh, we wanted to do this, but then we had to run it by Feige, and Feige either said yes, like thumbs up or thumbs down.
But no one is doing this at Star Wars.
Well, because
it
also
doesn't
Feige
seem like
has
anyone's doing this.
Feige has a long term. Like, not only does he know what the Doctor Strange story 2 is going to be, he knows what it's going to be in relation to something that's going to happen in Phase 5.
Yes.
So he might like the things that he knows. He can say no, don't do that in Doctor Strange 2 because it might mess with something that he knows is going to happen that they don't know is going to happen.
Right.
Yet.
And so my bigger point would be that Star Wars would be in a healthier place if they knew the stories that they wanted to tell.
Why doesn't Kathleen Kennedy know this? Why doesn't she know all this stuff?
Right, so that if those guys up and left, they just said, well, that's fine. There's 1,000 other prominent filmmakers that would love to play in the Star Wars universe, and it can't be Jon Favreau bailing us out every time.
For the love of God, no, it can't.
I'm going to do something I've never done on this podcast before. I'm going to reference T-Pain for a second here. Here's why. So T-Pain recently, this is interesting. T-Pain recently came out with this really cool video where he canceled his tour, and he was told by his team that he needed to tell everyone that he had some type of health issue or a family thing or whatever it was. So he gets on Instagram and he goes, you know what? I'm going to be honest with you guys. My team told me to say this, but I'm just going to let you know ticket sales were terrible. And that's why we're canceling the tour. And I just want to be honest with you about that. I thought that we had more time to plan this. We didn't. And I just want to be honest. I was told to lie to you, but I'm not going to. That being said, what are the chances that because of Season's 8 critical reception and the fans being upset about it, that they were forced out? No pun intended.
It's possible, but that's pretty funny.
I mean,
that's pretty funny, Kevin.
But in all honesty, what are the chances that the quotes that we're hearing from why they left are not the true story? That maybe, and then this new news story that Deadline just put out about Naomi Watts' prequel not going forward now. This all seems strangely connected to the idea if season 8 was a hit, I know it won Best Drama at the Emmys, whatever. That's because it was the end. But if it was a hit, I don't think we would be having this conversation right now. I really don't.
But if that's the case, and we'll move on after this. If that's the case, then I truly believe, to bring it back to Jake's reference, then that means Kathleen Kennedy is reading the comment section and making decisions based on what she's reading in the comment section. But in the proverbial sense.
When I ran into Kathleen Kennedy in Chicago at that random throne that was in that AT&T store,
coincidentally,
she was there because she was there to wanted to support the guys who created Game of Thrones. Remember, this was the weekend that Game of Thrones was premiering, so she was all in that conversation that I had with her briefly about these guys. It just seems weird to me that they signed a massive Netflix deal in between all of this and are somehow leaving this trilogy, right? And they weren't even going to direct, right? They were producing and writing this trilogy. This is not a directing job, from what I understand. Am I right about that or wrong about that?
I know, that's a good question. I'm not sure.
But double check
that. They never said that they were going to direct it.
They directed episodes of Game of Thrones. They directed the biggest episodes, right?
I think they were writing and producing this series. Double check that. My point being, though, is there, am I reaching here? Or do you think there's any possibility? I'm not trying to call anybody a liar. I'm just wondering, is there any chance that we are not being told the full truth here?
Oh, 100% chance. Of course, everybody lies. I wanted to quickly bring up, and then we'll move on really fast. When you say people that the people in charge of these things, are the creatives, that they don't care about feedback, that is the biggest line of shit I've ever heard in my entire life.
Thank you.
They all care. They all read it. They all care. And I'll give you one concrete example that I can think of. We were at South by Southwest for Pet Sematary. The movie had its world premiere at South by Southwest, and then we went to an after party. And we're hanging out at the after party, and then I finally I'm going to take off. And you had to go down an elevator from this restaurant where we were to go. And I ended up getting into the elevator with Lorenzo Di Bonaventura, big time producer. He's with his whole team. Yeah. He's one of the producers behind Pet Sematary, and he is losing his mind over the Rotten Tomatoes score because it had 10 fresh and 1 negative. And he's ranting about the 1 negative. Well, what do they say? Oh, it's Variety? No, they never. I remember the Variety review from the last Stephen King adaptation. We were never going to get a fresh from Variety. Who wrote it? What's the byline? We had 9. We were 9 fresh right up until this. And again, very measured. It's not like he was like losing his mind, but it bothered him, the 1 rotten. They were tracking it. His team was saying, "Oh, no, don't worry. It's like it reads, if you read the full review in context, it's not that bad." They point out a couple of things. Well, then why is it rotten on the site? Why'd they pull that one? And I was just sitting there listening to this conversation. They didn't know who I was. I was just hanging out in the corner, listening to them react about the thing. And it cemented what I already always believed, is that they all care. They all care, and they pay attention to that stuff 100%. So anyway, this week in movies. The segment where we like to talk about the films that we have not yet seen. But this time I think we're going to bat a little bit better than 500. Arctic Dogs. Anyone seen Arctic Dogs? Nothing? No.
I do like the movie 8 Below, though. That's what it reminds me of. Oh, I do like that movie.
What about Snow Dogs, starring Academy Award winner Cuba Gooding Jr.?
It's not. This isn't the point of the segment.
We just let's all think of the Arctic Dog movies.
Has anyone seen Harriet? Not Harriet the Spy, but the Harriet Tubman movie. Nothing.
No.
Cynthia,
I feel like
Erivo?
that was a movie that everyone was sort of on the lookout for, and then it fizzled in Toronto.
That's a perfect example of a movie that did not perform well. All right. Has anyone seen this movie called The Irishman?
I've seen The Irishman.
I believe I've seen it. Yes, I believe I've seen it.
2 guys who have seen The Irishman. All right. React to The Irishman without telling me a single thing about it, because I see it on Friday.
What the hell does that mean?
Did you like it?
Yes.
No, I
love it.
Yes.
Yes.
Give me your star ratings. Can you? Wait.
Out of 5.
The embargo's lifted, right?
Yeah, embargo's lifted.
Out of 5.
Can I?
Wait. Oh, before we get to that, will it make your top 10?
Yes.
Yes.
Will it make your top 5?
No.
No.
Ooh, intriguing. Okay, yeah, then give me your star ratings.
Can I give you the 2 lines that I've been telling people?
Sure.
And then I won't say any more. It's the movie that Godfather 3 wants to be, or wanted to be, but wasn't.
I haven't heard that from anyone.
And it's Goodfellas from the director of Silence.
Oh, that's actually got me really intrigued. Kevin?
But it's not Goodfellas.
You said 2 lines.
I love the film, and I think it's a film that is very, 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 very interesting if you want to look at maybe where Scorsese is in his life right now. That to me was the most powerful element of the film, is the idea of what choices we make in our lives, what legacy we want to leave behind, and what happens as we get older. And looking back on that to me was what the gut punch of that movie was. It was almost as if like Scorsese looked into the crowd and said, make sure you make every moment of your life important, and make sure you make every decision you make important, and make sure you weigh what's important in your life, i.e. family, over anything else. That's kind of what I took away from it.
Yes. I cannot wait. I can't wait. I'm dying that I haven't seen it yet.
It's phenomenal.
I'm dying.
Remember that when one of your opening lines was, "We're the podcast that hasn't seen The Irishman."
Yeah.
Now you're just the podcaster who hasn't seen The
host.
Irishman.
I know. Not yet. Counting down the hours. Last question, and then we'll move on to the next one. Who gives the best performance in the film?
Robert De Niro, no question at all, in my opinion. Jake?
Pacino does the most acting. De Niro does the best acting.
Let me say one thing, and this is not going to spoil anything. This is just a craft comment. Pacino's performance, it's not spoiler, I promise. Pacino's performance is the flashy one. It is the one that if you played a clip at the Academy Awards, you would go, that's amazing, because he's screaming a lot, yelling a lot, but he's amazing. Pacino is phenomenal in the film. To me, the harder performance, the harder acting is De Niro. And De Niro, he is the entire film. He's the title character of the film, and it's all in his eyes. Let me say this. This is opening like a limited release and theatrically throughout the next couple weeks. See it on the biggest screen you can. But De Niro, to me, while it's not like screaming and yelling and like explosive amounts of dialogue, it is the eyes and the face for the 3.5 hours that I fell in complete connection with, if that makes sense.
Pacino does screaming, you said?
He screams a lot. Hoffa was screaming though. Hoffa was up on these stages doing these rallies and doing the thing. And Pesci, by the way, plays against type, which is kind of cool, right? I mean, Jake,
does he tell Pesci?
Yeah, I mean, the tagline for Pesci's poster, because they each have individual character posters, is the quiet one.
Yeah.
Does he tell Pesci he's got a great ass? That's what I was.
I thought I heard that.
Gabe says, quote, it's all in his eyes because the rest of him is computer generated. Is that basically what happens?
No, that's
Don't
not
talk
what
about the de-aging. Don't talk about the de-aging.
I love that you're like, okay, is this a thing? Don't talk about it.
Don't talk about
But
it.
to clarify,
What'd you think of the
what just
movie?
happened
Don't
here,
tell
by the way, Sean asked for a 2-sentence reaction because he has a flight to catch, and he kept asking questions. So, Gabe, please note that Jake and Kevin listened to your orders this week, and Sean went on to more questions.
Did you give star ratings, or do you want to wait to give star ratings?
I'm going to wait.
Wait till you see it. Let's wait till you see it.
Wait till you see it.
Yeah, feel free to catch up.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Has anyone seen?
Sean, do your job. All right.
You both have seen. Oh,
Yeah.
Listen to this. So I haven't seen The Irishman. You both have seen Motherless Brooklyn. I have not. What do you guys want to say about that?
That is it's a really boring, generic movie that you've seen 1,000 times before. The only difference being that the lead character has an affliction, which makes him a little bit different than you've seen that character before. But other than that, I mean, it is a 2.5-hour slog. And, whenever you watch a film noir, you're kind of heading toward some sort of a revelation. You're trying to answer a question, right? What is the answer to this mystery? And for me, I don't know how Kevin feels, but when I got to the end and you figure out like what it's all about, I sort of went, seriously? Like that's it? That's what we just spent 2.5 hours like slogging through Brooklyn for? Was that was it? So a not recommend for me. It's the very definition of Norton being writer, director, producer, star. There was no one on set to tell him no, and it's obvious.
It's well shot. I would not recommend seeing it in a theater, but I mean, rent it maybe. I mean, it's actually not. It's not a horrible film. It's just not a great movie. It's just like it's almost like frustrating. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Can you picture that quote on the poster?
Yeah.
Rent it maybe, Kevin.
I mean, Jake, would you even say not rent it at all? Like, what are your thoughts?
I don't know, man.
And Kevin, who's the biggest proponent of theatrical, who's always telling people in the theaters, he's like, rent it maybe.
I wasn't a fan of it.
I want to plug that in addition to the Tim Miller interview, and of course Kevin did say, the Edward Norton conversation in last week's episode is really great. Go back and find that out. We also interviewed Robert Eggers, and it was a standalone little extra bonus podcast that we had for The Lighthouse because The Lighthouse opened in limited release last week. We were lucky to get him onto Skype at the end of last week. It kind of came together at the last minute. The boys were out in LA, so I did it really fast. So go over to the podcast stream and make sure that you check out the interview that we did with Robert Eggers. Goes to The Lighthouse. That's in theaters right now in limited release and expanding in the next couple of weeks. All right, to the big movie that's opening on November 1st, Terminator Dark Fate. You have now heard from Tim Miller. And as you all know, T2 is Kevin's favorite movie of all time. The movie that realistically started him on his path to where he is right now. And so leading into the junket last weekend, the running joke was if it happens, because Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton were going to be paired in the same room. Kevin, the way Kevin phrased it, and Kevin still gets way more excited about these opportunities than I do. I'm far more cynical and cold and jaded. But when he phrased it this way, I understood where he was coming from. He said, it's almost as if I'm getting to do the T2 junket.
Yeah.
And he said, for me, to put it into perspective, and it almost warmed my heart a little bit, not quite nearly as much. He said, it'd be, imagine if Bruce Willis did a Die Hard junket. Now, Bruce Willis has done a Die Hard junket, and he has stopped caring years ago. So it's not the same because Arnold and Linda are still really, really cool and are super into the characters. And so it was a beautiful moment for both of you guys, I know. But for now, tell me, how is the movie? Is the movie worth seeing?
Yeah, I think it's the Force Awakens of the Terminator franchise. It's the filmmakers, the storytellers going, look, this one story worked really well that one time. We've tried some other stuff. It didn't take. Let's just give them what they want. And it's kind of beat for beat T2. It's never going to be as good as T2. I thought so. Okay. Kevin's more of a T2 expert than I am.
Sure.
I just kept thinking, oh, that's like T2. Oh, that's like T2.
Oh,
and to the end I went,
okay.
Oh, so it's T2. It's T2 too, basically.
T2 squared.
And I was, you know what? And based on how the other 3 Terminators have turned out, I kind of don't mind. I enjoyed myself. I thought it was good. I thought
Is
it was really
Tim Miller
good.
the best director to handle a sequel outside of Cameron?
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, the bar is pretty low, isn't it?
Like versus McG?
Yeah. and Alan Taylor.
Right. This
Who
was
else did one?
Yeah.
I don't know who did three.
This was interesting for me because I wish there was a way for us to go back in time, no pun intended, to somehow have viewed this film without the Salvation movie and Genesis film. If they didn't exist, how this movie would have been received. I think a lot of the scaling on the grading of this movie is becoming the idea that it's just way better than the last 2 movies, and I wonder.
It's such a backhanded compliment.
Right. What does that say about this film? I'm going to go on record and say I love T3. I'm actually a T.
I do not like T3, man.
I'm a big T3 fan. I loved T3. T2 is my favorite movie of all time. T3 was, in my opinion, it felt good to see that the Arnold again. I loved the action in that film. It worked. Salvation was awful. Genesis was horrendous. I am thankful to Genesis though for a moment that I had with Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger in my Genesis interview where it gave me an excuse to bring up my favorite T2 scene that was never in the theatrical cut, which was the smile scene. So it's funny. I look back on Genesis and go, thank you for existing, but you are awful. That's the way I look at it. But Dark Fate's interesting because it is a direct sequel to T2. It is directly after the events of T2. It's like Jake said. To me, it was just like checking off little boxes of like, oh, there's this moment, there's that moment. It's very unnecessary, but it's still fun. And so I think it's hard to judge it having seen Genesis and Salvation because they were so bad. It is way better than those movies, but it's nowhere near. It's not even close to T2. And I say that because...
But I say you can't do that.
No, my point... Well, yes, you can. Why? It's a direct sequel. I mean, why can't you? I mean,
you can't walk into that theater thinking it's going to be anywhere near your favorite film of all time.
My point being, though, is why not just stay home and watch Terminator 2? Answer me that question. Jake.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because I'd like to see Linda Hamilton on the big screen again. Even in a lesser version, I'd still like to see her back with Arnold. I'll take a lesser version of them together than nothing at all.
Linda Hamilton is amazing in the film. Mackenzie Davis is amazing in the film. Story-wise,
I think Arnold is used well.
Arnold's
Are
great.
the set pieces good? How are the set pieces?
They're-
The plane one looked kind of cool.
It's cool, but the action... Okay, I'm gonna say this, and I have no problem saying this. The special effects in Terminator 2 Judgment Day look better than Terminator Dark Fate. And
That's interesting.
And that, to me, is a very fascinating thing to think about.
That's Jim Cameron, dude.
But
James Cameron, like I know him, James Cameron.
So if you take Stan Winston and what he did in 91 with that film and ILM and combining those massively amazing practical effects, also T-1000, Robert Patrick's performance is incredible. And this villain in this movie is a similar vibe to him. It's a very emotionless type of character, but it's not memorable. So it's frustrating to me to think about how to review this movie because am I reviewing it on a scale of how bad the last 2 were, or am I coming at this from a perspective of as a Terminator fan? It is an unnecessary film that I kind of enjoyed. So it's like
It's the Mr. Pibb of Terminator.
Yeah.
Like if T2 is Dr. Pepper,
Yeah.
this is a damn nice, solid, cold glass of Mr. Pibb.
Yeah. And listen, here's the
And
thing.
I've enjoyed a Mr. Pibb or two in my day.
But to Jake's point, though, it is awesome to see Linda Hamilton back on screen. It is awesome to see Arnold Schwarzenegger back on screen. It is awesome to see references to Terminator 2. I just don't know at the end of the day that I needed the movie. And this is coming from somebody who is the biggest fan of T2. It's fun.
Well,
it's fun,
yeah.
but it's not great.
Let's get to the more important story of the day. And then, Kevin, I'll stay on you. How nervous were you walking into that room of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton paired? And follow up, how did it go?
Well, it was one of those things where I've interviewed Arnold Schwarzenegger a few times over the years. I've been lucky enough to have him as an interview. And in these interviews, we've discussed...
I'm glad you clarified.
Yeah, I didn't know where I was-
Got very worried there for a second.
What? No, my point was, though, like, I spent a lot of time talking Terminator with Arnold Schwarzenegger in interviews. He's...
Well, your best one, let me just break in really fast. You did one, like, behind the scenes at, like, a club, or where was he? What was that?
This was the craziest thing ever. So Arnold released a book called Total Recall. And one day I was sitting in my $28,000 a year sales job cubicle in Tyson's Corner, and I was looking at online, and I'm like, Arnold has a book coming out. And I was like, I have no context. I've never talked to the guy before. How can I interview this guy? So I look up the publisher, Simon & Schuster. I call their 800 number. Some guy answers, and he goes, yeah, send me an email. So I sent him an email. Long story short, I had no camera at the time. I had no camera crew, nothing. I was working a sales job. I went to some crazy little camera spot, rented a camera and a microphone. Lauren went with me, went to a book tour thing where he was reading some of the excerpts from the book. And they set me up in this seedy, like nasty green room in the back of this place in Washington, D.C., and Lauren held the camera on it, sat there and pressed record for me. And Arnold and I are sitting there doing interviews. And this was the moment when he fake stabbed me in the chest and said, stick around. He did, don't disturb my friend. He's dead tired. He was doing all these lines. And then I got him later for Last Stand. And he did F you a-hole to me, which was amazing, which was the line from Terminator 1. It was awesome. So going into this room, I was
Wait, can I break in just for 1 second?
Yeah.
To that end, I never want to hear anybody tell me they don't know how to make it or it's too hard, right? Like, that just goes to show, if you really want to do this, if it really matters to you, if you really care, you'll figure out a way to... Now, not everybody's Kevin McCarthy, I understand that. But you could figure out ways to do this if you have the dedication and the ingenuity of this kid who's working a sales job.
There is always a
called Simon
1-800
Schuster.
number.
Yes, exactly. There's
Use
always
just a
way.
metaphor in life.
There's
There's
always
an
a way.
800 number for
Because
that.
I can't emphasize enough how incredible that is to me that Kevin just was like, Arnold's got a book. I'm going to figure out how to interview him, and did it. That blows my mind.
So, and thank you. And the crazy part about it was, so subsequent interviews later, I was able to interview him for Terminator Genesis, which I got a bunch of Terminator 2 questions in there as well. So the weird part for me was Linda Hamilton being in that room. That was the nerves for me, because I've never interviewed Linda Hamilton. I'm obsessed with the Sarah Connor character. I think she's one of the best action actors of all time. And it was this 4-minute window where you would sit down across from the two stars of Terminator 2, my favorite movie of all time. And we had heard the day before that their answers could go long. You might get 1, maybe 2 questions. So the nerves were more about like getting things that I wanted to talk about with them, but also not making myself look like an idiot. And my only thing was I didn't want to walk out of that room, and I didn't want Arnold Schwarzenegger to hate me or Linda Hamilton to hate me. And so I do the interview, and I tell them how much this movie meant to me when I was 8 years old. And so I asked them, was there a film that changed their life? And they gave this, she gives this answer about The Way You Were with Barbara Streisand. And Arnold tells me this amazing. So Arnold starts telling me this story. And this is where I started like freaking the hell out. So when I saw Terminator 2 Judgment Day for the first time, I remember it very vividly. I won't go into the details, but I remember sitting in between my parents and watching it on a couch from a VHS rental from Farm Fresh in Newport News, Virginia. And I was sitting there, and that was the moment that something clicked in my head and went, oh my God, I love movies. Oh wait, how did How did that liquid thing just come out of the floor? I didn't know what I was talking about, but I knew that what I had seen just clicked something in my head. So that was the question to Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton. What was the moment something clicked in your mind when you watched a film? And Arnold starts telling this story about seeing Tarzan with his dad for the first time. And the way he described it reminded me of the moment I was on that couch with my parents, all wide-eyed and like geeking out. He was telling me this story about like going to a theater with his dad, and he didn't understand that seats were like folded up, and he sat down and fell on his butt. And then he got back up, and his dad was like yelling at him, joking around. He was talking about watching Tarzan. He said the arrows were coming at him on the screen. He was like ducking out of the way. And it was the moment that he kind of truly realized how much he loved movies. So to have that connection, and then interview ends, I go around to the back to take a photo, and the guy taking the photo tells me to get down because I need to like get to their level because I'm 6'3". Arnold literally goes, "Get down," like he does, like, and I'm like, what is going on here? And so like I walk around the room, and I'm like, and I say, "Get down," and then I'm like, "Get to the chopper." I start like repeating his lines, and he's like, I was like, "Dude," and I said, "Don't disturb my friend," and he looks at me.
And that
is
when Arnold hated him.
Yeah, no, I walked out in a very positive way, and like Linda Hamilton, I was so nervous. There was a question I was going to ask, and then I'll wrap this up. I was going to ask Linda Hamilton about her twin sister, which is one of them, like, my favorite pieces of movie trivia of all time is that her twin sister plays the copy of Sarah Connor in Terminator 2. So when T-1000 becomes her at the end in that foundry, that is her twin sister. And I was nervous about asking it for two reasons. One, I had no idea what her relationship was with her sister now. This is 27 years later. And also, the one thing I didn't think about is that she was married to James Cameron, and I forgot about that. So I asked this question about, what was it like filming this scene with your sister? And she goes into this amazing answer about pulling James Cameron aside on the set and telling him, if you make my sister upset, I'm sending her home. Because he was talking about the idea that he would bark orders on set. Like, it was interesting. And then when I left the room, Lauren was like, my wife was like, they were married. I'm like, oh, that's interesting that she was talking about him in that way. I forgot they were married. Right. So it was just a really weird.
But were they married during T2?
I forget when.
No, but it was, but her saying like things like, I told Jim to say this. I told my sister was getting her hair extended so she could look like me. It was very weird to be in that room. So that to answer your question, it was. The win for me was not walking out of there with Arnold hating me. I just wanted to walk out.
But Jakey, it was
being respected.
It was really emotional for you too, wasn't it? Like,
yeah,
it was a huge thing.
I think it's funny. I think there are people of a certain age that if you grew up when that movie came out, and it was funny because in the interview with Tim Miller, he references both Kevin and I's love of the thumbs up scene, and he said, "Well, I kind of assumed everyone loved that scene." To which he then said, "No, like if you're a person of a certain age, then yeah, you love that scene. But a lot of people thought I was a little schmaltzy when the movie came out," which I then learned in my newsroom today because I aired a clip of Arnold talking about that scene, and I went off about how much I love that scene, and a lot of older people in the newsroom went, "Nah, that scene's a little overly sentimental." Yeah. So I was today old whenever I learned that not everyone loves the thumbs up scene. But yeah, it was a great moment. Hearing him. I don't have the connection to it quite like Kevin does.
No, Jake, tell your 6-year-old story real fast. This is a great story about the 1099 999 rack.
Oh, I grew up in a very small, poor country town, and we didn't have a lot of money growing up, but I grew up down the street from a small video store. And the only time that my parents would ever buy me a movie, like for me to own and be able to watch over and over again, is if this movie store called Movie Land put it on the used. It had a little rototiller. And they would put used movies on there, and there might be 10 at a time, and you spin them around, and I'd run in there and spin it around and see what was used. And if it was $9.99 or less, and we hadn't gotten one in a while, my mom would get it for me. And if I begged, I had to freaking beg, "Mom, please, for the love of God, buy me this movie." And one day, and I used to go check all the time to see, because T2 had been out for a while. So usually, we're talking like Jurassic Park or something that maybe had just come out. And so he would have no reason to have a used copy of T2 because it had been out. They were all used. But one day, he had T2 used on the used rack for sale for $10.99. And I said, Mom, please, Mom, please buy it for me. Mom, it's $1. I'll do chores for a lifetime. And she said, no, you're not. No, I said $9.99 or less. It's $10.99. And so they had me enrolled in hell, aka T-ball, when I was a child. And I hated playing T-ball when I was a kid.
Why?
And because I was scared of the ball. I was scared that the ball was going to hit me.
No
I was
kidding.
terrified.
Same with me.
It's on a tee, you idiot.
I used to just like I used to pray that I would be walked. So I used to like close my eyes and pray that the pitcher was just really bad and would walk me. So at least I could count that I got on base. And I'd be like, yes!
What Jake is saying is that like he didn't hate T-ball. He hated the idea that like after T-ball you would have the pitcher throwing the ball.
I'm sorry. Yeah, pitchers. Yeah, it wasn't T-ball. It was Little League.
Yeah.
And so my mom and dad said, okay, if you hit a home run in this game, we will go to Movie Land and we will buy you T2 for $10.99. And I closed my eyes.
What pressure they put on you.
I know. And I closed my eyes and I swung like I've never swung before. And I did it for Arnold. For Arnold! And I made contact. You heard the ting of the aluminum against the ball. And it looked like I was going to get thrown out at first. But God was looking over me, and the first baseman missed the catch. And they said, run, Jake! So I ran to second base. And he still hadn't gotten the ball yet. So they said, keep running! And I was like, oh, I'm going to get my home run! I'm going to get it! And they stopped me at third. So I didn't get my home run. But I got in my mom's blue Chrysler minivan, and I said, Mom, please! I'm never going to do that again! Come on! Like, I got 3 bases. What more do you want from me? You can't ask anything more. And we stopped at Movie Land on the way home, and they paid the extra $1 and got my $10.99 used copy of Terminator 2
Judgment. Think about how crazy that story is. And Jake and I didn't know each other when we were kids, but like not to the extent of that. But I had a situation when I was a kid playing baseball that my dad told me if I caught 3 balls in the outfield that I would get $20. And I remember like catching it and getting the $20. But to Jake's story, like the personal element and connection we have to a film like Terminator 2 is very similar. I mean, mine was more about report cards and getting my grades to an all S's instead of N's and U's, whatever I was getting at the time. And my parents
S for sexy.
For sexy, but for satisfactory. And like I had to bribe my parents to say if I got all S's, can you let me watch this movie? Because I was 8 years old and we had a babysitter named Tiffany who watched us when they went and saw it in theaters. And I waited up for them when they got home that night from seeing it in theaters, and they were like. They were going to see it for content check to make sure there was no sex in the movie. Remember, this is back in the day when parents were like, "Oh, you can watch all the violence, but none of the nudity. Like, we'll let you watch True Lies, but you can't watch Jamie Lee Curtis's strip sequence." Very, very backwards in my opinion. But my point was though, I'll never forget, asking my parents if I get all S's, and I had to like stop talking in class. I was a very talkative kid. I asked a lot of questions, and my teachers would say needs improvement, and I would get N's, and my parents would be like, Kevin. And I was like, if I get all S's on my 3rd grade report card, can I please watch the movie with you? And I worked my butt off, and I got all S's, and similar to Jake's story, it was like that's how badly we wanted to see the movie or wanted the film, and to be in that room 27 years later, as journalists and sitting across from them and just being able to talk to them about the movie, it's hard to explain how surreal it was. And this is not about me. This is about anybody who's a fan of these movies, and Jake and I have a very similar connection to Terminator 2, and that's what it was like. That day was crazy. It was insane.
All of this reminds me very much of a story that I shared with someone recently when I was trying to describe the dynamic of this show, and I was I'm going to leave out some of the details, but someone was with the 3 of us in a conversation, and this person is also a movie lover. Someone who's super into movies and also makes a living doing movies. And at the end of the conversation of the 3 of us going off on a topic, this person said under their breath, but loud enough, "Well, you guys are way more into this than I am." And it's just like that's just the reality of it. Like people really love movies, right? But it's just they haven't been as into it over the course of their entire lives as I think the three of us have, right? So we were able to pull these stories from
That
our
was
past
Gabe,
and-
by the way, who said that.
Well, no, that would require talking. So, Gabe, Gabe. Jake, I'm curious. When you were standing up at the plate in this fateful Little League game, and you had all of the pressure of hitting this ball, I'm curious, did you hear a whisper from the outfield that said, "If you hit it, they will buy"?
You a 1099 used copy of Terminator 2. It was the worst Field of Dreams sequel imaginable.
I'm going to put the accent on.
And then Arnold emerges from the corn and just gives me a thumbs up.
And Tim Miller goes,
back in
"On
the
the
corn
nose,
and,
man."
And his thumb like disappears into the corn.
What actually happened was Jake's bat was actually the knife hand from T1000 that did the milk carton sequence, and that was what swung it out. That's literally, he just finished killing Todd with the milk carton, and that was what he was using for the baseball bat.
Jake, did you hit that triple with your Robert Patrick?
Oh man,
Gabe, he's literally sitting right next to you. Do something about it.
beautiful.
Throw something
Sean.
at him.
Thank you for
Kevin.
that.
I appreciate that.
Sean, that was
All right.
wow.
This week's blend game,
Wow.
in keeping with the theme of the show, is hashtag ArnoldBlend.
That was incredible.
We had a lot of great audience participation. We are picking. It was pointed out that we might have played the Arnold Schwarzenegger blend game prior to, but this was during the best phase of the game, the volume 1 phase of the blend game. This now is going to be favorite. And in addition to doing favorite, we're also going to be giving our favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger one-liners. I've been told by Gabe that, Jake, you get to go first. And the stipulation, for people who might not have heard last week or seen on social media, we took T2 off the board because we kind of assumed that Kevin, for sure, since it being his all-time favorite film, that, you know, it's such an easy pick, it might be the obvious pick, so we just went ahead and removed it. And so we said, if you can't pick T2, what would you say is your favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger film? And then, of course, we need your one-liner, and Jake begins it.
I think I am going with, and I still feel like this is a bit of a cop-out, I'm going to go with The Terminator.
Okay. That's fair.
If you,
I think that's
if
fair.
you remove, but for so many completely different reasons than I would have picked T2. And the reason I'm going to pick the Terminator is because I feel like he doesn't get enough credit for how absolutely terrifying he is in that movie. Like, it's almost a borderline horror film. I mean, he is,
It is a horror
such
movie.
a relentless, cold, soulless, mechanical villain. And it propels the movie forward. Before the series turned him into the savior, and before the series became a bunch of famous one-liners that people repeated over and over, and then got parodied, and then got parodied by the parodies, it was a very simple story of this cold machine chasing this poor woman for something she hadn't even done yet, because she hadn't even given birth to this child yet. And it's such an incredible premise and such an incredible usage of, because we've seen some bad ones, but such an incredible usage of the time travel plot device. And it still makes so much sense without really picking it apart. I just love it so much. And obviously, I think T2 is a better film. And I think T2 will always forever be the greatest thing he's ever done. But I just, the simplicity, but just the fear that he brings to that, I actually think it's his best performance. I think T2 is a better movie, but I think he's better in The Terminator.
Well, so both of you guys saw T2 before The Terminator?
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
I'll tell you, it was unusual to see him play the good guy. Like, the impact of that character shift, it's second nature now.
And they didn't really correct me if I'm wrong, they didn't really publicize that, right?
Not in the least bit.
And I love that.
The marketing leaned very heavily into Linda Hamilton's terrified reaction. And I remember from the trailers, the image was of him walking through the hallway with pulling the gun out of the box of roses.
Yeah.
And the flowers falling to the floor.
Iconic.
No, they did not let you know early on in the marketing that they were shifting the Terminator. and everyone was super curious about like, well, how does this other new liquid guy play into it? That was a huge twist back when that one came out in 1991. What's your favorite line? He says that? Which movie is that?
Every movie he's in. If only I have to go. God. Can we come back to me? I didn't pick one. Come back to me.
You're gonna get what do they give for unsatisfactory, Kevin? You?
You're gonna get you, man.
You know what I didn't get was a reminder text from Gabe saying text it to me.
Oh, it's
That's what I didn't
Gabe's fault. It's Gabe's fault.
A reminder text. All right, Kevin, you're up.
This was really hard for me because there are three other Arnold films that I are on like even playing field for me, but I don't want to cheat. I don't want to take the easy road here, so I am gonna pick one. I went with Last Action Hero, and the reason why I went with Last Action Hero is because when I saw that film,
That's an interesting pick.
Well, it's when I saw that movie, and I still love that movie today, and I understand that it was not well received. When I saw that movie, I saw it at a time in my life where Arnold was my favorite actor of all time. So Terminator 2, as I mentioned earlier, was the movie that changed my life. So anything that came out after that, Arnold was like everything to me. Everything Arnold did, I was immediately at. I had all the VHSs. Last Action Hero was essentially my dream, right? The guy goes into an Arnold Schwarzenegger film, Jack Slater, and gets to live in the movie world as Arnold is taking out bad guys and delivering awesome one-liners, like asking a guy if he wants to be a farmer, then kicking him and saying, "Here's a couple of acres." I mean, like it was amazing, and like to this day, that movie still floors me because the look on that kid's face when he's sitting in that theater and he gets that golden ticket. And he enters the screen into the back of Arnold's car as like the bad guys. Remember this? Those bad guys are chasing him with a van, and the van flies up, and like everything is so ridiculously over the top. And then like they're referencing Terminator 2. Like Robert Patrick walks out of the police station at one point. They go into a blockbuster, quote unquote, and Sylvester Stallone is now the star of Terminator 2, not Arnold. And like it was like my favorite like play on what made Arnold so great. And I remember, like, I always love that scene when him and the kid are driving past the bad guy's house, and he's like, "You're telling me all these years I've been doing all this work, I just have to point to that place and say the bad guy's in there, and the bad guy literally is living in there, and like, and the dogs are doing all these cool tricks." It was so ridiculously over the top, but it was my dream. It was like I could not imagine a cooler concept. Like I watched that film as that kid, and this was before I ever dreamed of ever even having an encounter with Arnold. Arnold was the guy I wanted to meet as a kid. I used to dream that my dad would leave the house and go to work during the day, and he was Arnold. And he would come back, and it was like that's how much Arnold meant to me. So to see a movie where a kid could enter a movie with Arnold and live out action scenes was amazing. That's why I went with Last Action Hero. And I understand that people didn't receive that film as well. I understand that people were not happy with the length.
Didn't do that great.
I know.
I'm looking it up right now.
But I love Last Action Hero. To be or not to be, not to be. And he blows up like it was so awesome. I don't know why I love that movie, but I do. The other two that were right there with it, oddly enough, were True Lies and Commando. And it was weird because those were harder for me not to choose because I think True Lies is a better film. But Last Action Hero leans more into my favorite because of what it meant. Favorite line of all time, I won't waste time doing this, I've already done it on the show before, is the Commando line, "Don't disturb my friend, he's dead tired." And I think just that is to me the pinnacle of what Arnold's one-liners were. Just this over-the-top, ridiculous, self-aware, he just broke this guy's neck, and he's being polite to the flight attendant. "Don't disturb my friend, he's dead tired." The guy's like dead right next to him. It was genius. And so that's my favorite line. But Last Action Hero, if anybody listening to our show has never seen it, just try and watch it from the perspective of a kid who was obsessed with Arnold Schwarzenegger growing up, and imagine being that kid going into that movie. And when you're a kid, you have a wild imagination, and you think about that was like the dream for me. So that movie spoke to me more than anything else besides T2 for him.
To bring it back full circle, the story for Last Action Hero is by Zach Penn. Former ArnoldBlend guest, or one of our earliest ArnoldBlend guests, who wrote Ready Player One, or adapted Ready Player One. Was he
Have
the
you
first?
seen
Gabe
it,
says it.
Sean?
Jake and Gabe said they first?
Oh, yeah.
Last Action Hero?
I love Last Action Hero.
But
I also feel the
again
same way
recently,
you
too.
feel. I watched it as a kid.
And it was screenwritten by Shane Black. Shane Black.
Did McTiernan do that movie?
John McTiernan directed it, yes.
The Die Hard director.
I have my one-liner.
Oh, go ahead. What is it?
My one-liner is from Jingle All the Way.
Oh, God.
And it is, put that cookie down now!
I had to laugh because if Gabe could speak, he would tell you that my two choices, Kevin, were True Lies and Commando.
Yeah.
Those are the two I could not choose between.
I mean, those are top tier Arnold action movies. Top tier.
And I ultimately went, since it's favorite, I went with Commando.
Yes.
Oh, good one. Good one.
Commando rules.
Let off some steam.
Well, it is the quintessential Arnold when he was in the Predator, Total Recall, Running Man phase, and in Commando, and I rewatched it recently because I was like, can this hold up? Does this actually hold up? And it does. It's amazing. But he doesn't look human. Like, he's so chiseled. He looks like he's made out of granite.
Sean,
like,
remember how goofy the beginning is with that cheesy music and he's carrying the log and they're feeding the deer with Alyssa Milano? It's like so cheesy, but it's like perfect. It's perfect.
The music in that movie is tremendous. It's 80s synthesizer music. I've told this story I think when I revisited, I told this story on the thing about how after he breaks that guy's neck and tells him not to sleep, he pretends he's going to the bathroom, but somehow sneaks into the bottom of the plane.
Jumps out of a moving plane.
He cuts his way out through the wall and holds onto the wheel before the landing gear comes up and comes
Sean,
off.
how about when he lifts the phone booth out in the mall and like picks a phone booth out of his own hand?
The mall fight is one of the funniest things because, again, here's Arnold trying to walk through the mall and shadow somebody, but he doesn't look like a normal human being at all. So every security guard in the mall is instantly like, oh, this guy's up to no good. Let's follow him and see what's going on. And they all try to fight him at once. And as Kevin said, in order to distract them, he lifts the entire phone booth out of the floor. And but then he has another guy who he ends up fighting in the end, who's like his counterpart in Special Forces, Bennett. And this guy's also like psychotic. Like, it was great. Those 80s movies are great. They always found really great psychotic villains. And Commando to me it's over the top, but it's kind of one of those movies where they didn't have a script and they just said, we got Arnold, let's just let Arnold be Arnold kind of thing. So he goes from action piece to action set piece and carries it with one-liners. My one-liner also comes from Commando. It is not the don't disturb my friend, he's dead tired, although that is tremendous. It is what Kevin said, when Arnold takes a pipe and throws it through Bennett's chest, and the pipe goes into a wall, and I don't know what's behind it, but whatever was behind it had a lot of steam in it, and it pours steam through Bennett's body, through the pipe, and it cuts back to Arnold, and he says, let off some steam, Bennett. And I just howl. It's terrific.
Mike Flanagan missed a really big opportunity in Dr. Sleep for someone to say "let off some steam" at some point. I don't know why he didn't drop that line in there. I don't know. But Sean, how about when he goes to that island? I think Commando's his biggest body count. I'll have to double check on that. There was a website back in the day that listed his body count, and he kills dozens of people on this island, bad guys. And then the general comes up to him and he goes, and this is at the end of the movie, and Arnold's like all sweaty, like just finished killing everybody. He goes, anything left for us? And he goes, just bodies. Just bodies. Just bodies. You're like, what a line. Who says that?
Tremendous.
Put that cookie down.
No. All right.
You told me you killed me last,
ArnoldBlend.
Sully. So, I lied.
Wait, what is that from? What's that one from?
Commando.
Is that from Commando?
Remember Sully's like, you told me you'd kill me last. And he goes, you told me to kill me last, Matrix. He goes, I lied. And then he drops him off the cliff.
What am I looking at here? Oh yeah, my plane. I know. My flight is 6:30. I'm fine.
I love how you have a plane.
I don't have as hard of an out. Oh, Gabe says he's super busy. Yeah, I know. I do. I have to run to a flight. Okay, audience picks. Stephen Glover says Predator. Mrs. Love on Twitter said True Lies. Caprice Williams said The Running Man.
You're
Julie
fired.
says she can't choose between True Lies and Kindergarten Cop. And then Ray Celarum says Twins. All great films.
My wife's favorite is
Terrific
Kindergarten
Arnold lines.
Cop. No question.
That's a really good one.
That movie. She does,
Really good
man. How about the one-liner?
Who is
True
your
Lies?
daddy?
Sean,
What does he do?
when he blows that guy from the missile and goes, "You're fired." I mean, what a line, man. Come on.
Thank you, everyone, for participating. Okay, for next week, please reach out to us on Twitter using hashtag Shia LaBeouf Blend. We are going to play the films of Shia LaBeouf, a much better actor than people give him credit for, and we will tell you why on next week's episode of Real Blend. So use that hashtag on social media, hashtag Shia LaBeouf Blend. You can also send us your pick via email at realblend@cinemablend.com. While you're there, do me a favor, write us up a nice review. We'll read it at the top of the next show. I want to point out it is official. Here we are at episode number 90. We have talked about the fact that we are going to Washington, D.C. to celebrate episode number 100. And the D.C. meetup page is now live. We are still figuring out the venue and the exact time. All that's going to be determined based on the number of people who sign up. So do us a favor. Go over to the website, bit.ly, bit.ly. We've used these before. bit.ly, bit.ly/RealBlendDC. It's bit.ly/RealBlendDC. And just let us know whether you guys think you can be there on January 3rd or the weekend of. So we're trying to figure this out. All right, right now we are planning to do the meetup on Friday night, January 3rd. But do us a favor, tweet us if you're planning on coming to the event, and it'd be easier for you to get there on Saturday because we clearly, we want to make it available to as many people as we possibly can since we're doing this. And if enough people tell us Friday night's really tough, it's a work night, whatever the reason is, and Saturday would be better, then we're early enough in the process of putting this together that we could, if enough people weigh in with that feedback and say Saturday is better, then we can maybe pivot and figure out that way. But either way, go to the website, bit.ly/RealBlendDC, and weigh in and let us know what you think if you're coming and what day works better. Can we say that?
My mom is confirmed. My mom and dad will both be there.
That's unbelievable. That's amazing. Okay, so we're going to wrap. You will get a chance to meet Kevin's mom. She will be, I swear to God, she's going to be the most popular person.
She's going to be everybody. Nobody else is going to be there. It's just all my mom.
Everybody. Go to social media, follow us at RealBlend. You can also follow the guys individually at Jake's Takes, at Kevin McCarthy TV. I am at Sean_O'Connell. Again, leave us a review. We'll be back next week with the normal blend of news and reviews and reactions to things going on in the world of entertainment and potentially some exciting celebrity interviews. So until we get together for episode number 91.
Done? Kirk. I don't know what that was.
What the fuck was that?
I was trying to make it different. I don't know.
Yeah, I know it's hard after 90 episodes.
I was trying to add like some personality to it versus just yelling Dunkirk. I don't know what that was. I'm sorry.